Hey, welcome back again to the Painfully Honest Tech Podcast. My name is Jason T. Lewis. Painfully Honest Tech, so honest it hurts. I'm here today with the one and only Adam Matlock, TechOdyssey. And I realized today, as I was like typing the name of the podcast, what date it was, who it was going to be with, I realized that your last name is Matlock, and you're a lawyer.
Some people
And
make that correlation.
yeah, I'd never made I'd never made it before, but there it is.
Most people don't even realize that I'm an attorney. I just talk
Yeah.
about phones all the time.
Well, I mean, that's part of it for me is I know you personally, so kind of know more of your background than the average person might. But yeah, I was like, wait a minute, Matlock, and didn't Matlock the show take place in Texas?
No, I believe it was Georgia, Savannah,
Okay,
Georgia.
okay,
Yeah.
I
I
knew.
watched it growing up.
Yeah,
It had, I mean, everybody. I mean, we'd go somewhere. My mom would cash a check. You go through the toll booth. You sign your name somewhere. Oh, any relation? I love your show. Yeah, my whole life.
that's funny. That's funny. So how you doing? How you doing, man? Tell the people a little bit about where they can find you. You
Sure.
know, your favorite
Well,
color.
you can find me on YouTube, of course. TechOdyssey is one word, and then on Twitter. X now, is this what it's called?
I Yeah, I guess we'll talk about that in a little
On
bit.
the platform
Yeah.
formerly known as Twitter. You can
Yeah.
find me at Adam J. Matlock.
Yes. Yes. TechOdyssey. And I was thinking about it too. Like Odyssey is a deceptively difficult word to spell, because there's that extra Y in there that,
I actually had to help somebody with it the other day. They're like, "Is there an E in there, or is another Y? Like, is it two Y's or is it one S?" I was like, "Here, Here's my
yeah.
business card."
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I mean, there are several words that I always like have to think about the spelling, and Odyssey is one of them. And I taught I taught literature and writing. I should know how to
I
spell.
know with Homer. I mean, I that's one of the things that I drew from. I always loved the Iliad and the Odyssey.
Yeah.
It's a great story, but
Yeah.
I haven't had a trouble with spelling it. But I've been spelling it since I created it, so it's second nature for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, there's been at least this week there's been some like real tech news. We've had some excitement, I guess.
Devices.
Yes, new devices coming out. Uh the Z Fold 5, the Z Flip 5, and then a bevy of new tablets, right?
Yeah, so there's some excitement I think worthwhile in the tablet department because it's been a year and a half as they
Mm.
push back the tablet cycle because they used to come out in the fall and now they pushed it to the spring. Well, no, it used to come out in the spring. Whatever. Samsung can never make up their mind. But we have the new Tab S9 series, which has the new Snapdragon 8 Generation 2. So I'm,
Right.
I'm happy about that.
Nice. Yeah, I always wanted to grab the 14-inch version
The thing's a
of
monstrosity.
yeah, and I would look at it, like I would go to Best Buy or whatever, and I would look at it, and I'm like, man, that thing is sexy. And then I would think about how annoying my 12.9-inch iPad Pro is.
Yeah, it's like you try and lay in bed and use it. It's like having, I feel like a I don't know. I don't know what it's like, a big tapestry in bed. Like just trying to hold on to the sucker to use it.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I can't barely read with my iPad Pro in bed or anything like that because you hold it and then all of a sudden your hands are falling asleep and it's like,
Well, and you try and prop it up, and then you can't see the bottom. So then you get to the bottom of the article, and you have to. It's just, I
yeah.
love the idea. It feels like Star Trek to me. Like
Hmm.
every time I see one of those, I just imagine all those touch screen panels
Yeah.
from the Enterprise, and I'm like, it's so cool.
Yeah.
But I know as I'm getting closer to 40, which is just 6 months away, I'm realizing more and more about the genuineness of myself. I'm like, I know my limitations. Just give me the 11-inch tablet. I'm
Yeah.
happy.
Yeah. I do most of my book reading on a Kindle. So I have like the Kindle Oasis. I think that's a 6.7 or 7-inch screen. I can't remember exactly. And it's kind of the perfect size for reading, but there's something about the iPad mini.
Yes, and I wanted to touch on that because I love the iPad mini. I wish there was an iPad mini Pro. I would be ecstatic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the iPad mini at this point, it has the Apple Pencil 2 support,
Mhm.
and it has well, it doesn't have like an M series chip in it yet, but maybe
I
if
don't
they,
think I don't even think that's necessary. I want an OLED panel
yeah, yeah,
with ProRes on it, without the whatever the high resolution is. I'm drawing a
yeah,
blank, but I it's like I love the iPad Mini, and it's like the 60-inch kind of washed out LCD. Oh, sorry, 60 hertz washed out LCD, and I'm like, we could do better.
yeah, yeah. I know I saw yesterday that TCL has come out with, or is just about to come out with, um, an e-ink color tablet.
Yeah, I saw the prototypes before. They're really neat.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm hoping I can figure out a way to get a hold of one of those, because e-ink is, in terms of resolution for reading and stuff, it's always much sharper. So I'm kind
Uh,
of I'm kind of interested to see what that's all about.
yeah, those are pretty neat.
Yeah. But anyway, back to the folds. The folds. I know how I feel, but let's you go ahead and tell us how you felt about the announcement of the folding phones this year.
Well, I have to tell you, Jason, I'm really excited. So, I
All
mean,
the innovation.
all the innovation. There's so much of it, and it's funny because foldable phones were the new frontier. They're like the cutting edge, the bleeding edge of technology, and Samsung found a way to make it stale. It's like
Yes.
my thoughts. I made a note the other day, and I think it was I wanted to use this term, impressively bland.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it is impressive. I mean, it's great. I just made it a tweet or an X, whatever they're called nowadays.
Zing.
I put out a message into the void saying it's amazing to me. I started off in the '80s as a kid with an 8088 like IBM machine that
Mhm.
had no hard drive,
Right.
like no mouse, and it was like 15 megahertz, whatever in the world it was. But and then like I'm sitting here with this phone in my hand that has a 3 gigahertz processor, like 12 gigs of RAM, and like the screen folds. Like it's crazy. But
Yeah.
then it's like, here's 17.99. We took away the gap in the screen
Mhm.
and gave you a new chip. And I'm like, well, I mean, and it's the brightness on the inside. They took it 1700 nits. So I mean,
Yeah.
if you've never had a foldable, and I think the important thing is if you got a fold for, like, probably don't need to buy it. But if you've never had one before, it can be exciting for a new customer.
Yeah. No, I think that's true. I just, again, the knock on the folding phones, or at least the bigger ones, the Flip is still relatively similarly priced to a slab smartphone. Um, and the Moto Razor
Actually, I
also.
really like it. The new
I
Motorola Razor.
Yeah, I want to try it out. I want to try it out, and I just I just haven't, like, it's not available to just like walk into my, like, I don't know if I'm on Verizon. I don't think Verizon carries
Verizon's
it.
not, yeah, and that's so odd because
Yeah,
Verizon had the Motorola exclusives for years, and
yeah,
now this they come out with a new one, and it's not there.
yeah. I still remember when Verizon had the Moto, the ones with the attachments, the magnetic attachments.
Oh yeah, the Moto Z's.
Yes, the Z's. Uh, I remember getting one of those and it being like super cool.
I loved
Um,
them.
yeah, and this would have been probably like 2015,
You could get the
2016.
battery attachment, you could get the projector attachment, you could get the speaker attachment,
Yeah,
like with the little pins on the back. I tell you what, the Motorola Z, the first one I had, and it had like that green bamboo wood back on it that you could
oh
pop
yeah,
off.
yeah,
That was a sexy phone.
yeah. It was, and Moto. Even before that, they had those. Oh, geez, I'm blanking on everything today, but the sort of budget friendly phone that they had, that was it the X?
Yeah, they're the
Um,
Moto X. And as
and
far as back as like 2014, 2016 models, and those
yeah,
were good.
and those had, you could get like you could get the wood back, you could get a metallic back. You could actually go on their website and sort of design the one that you wanted, which was kind of cool.
I miss
Um,
all that.
yeah, I know. Smartphones used to be fun.
Mhm.
There used to be a lot of variety, and you could grab something like a Moto X, or you could grab something like the Moto Z, or even like LG phones were really, they some LG phones were very bland, but LG, I mean, they did the LG Wing, which was a crazy phone.
But it worked. I mean, I thought
Yeah,
that it actually kind of worked. It was an enjoyable interface.
yeah, because I mean, if you flip it out, and then you've got the regular size phone that you can use for a keyboard. And then, you've got the landscape mode for the top screen. So you just got more screen real estate to deal with while still being able to hold it naturally.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I watched a lot of content on it. I'm like, just sit there and just hold the bottom like a normal phone, but it's like having a big screen
Yep.
experience without having to hold it with two hands the whole time.
Yeah.
I thought it
And
was
then,
thoughtful.
yeah. Yeah. And then they had, for this, I think they had one for the V50, but for the V60 as well, they had the case
Yeah, the
with the
dual
screen
screen
in it.
case.
Yeah. And that was right when the first Galaxy Z Fold came out, which was a total disaster when it first came out. And I was just rereading an article to kind of, refresh myself on the history of that phone, because it was supposed to come out. Pre-orders were in.
April.
They sent it out to, you know, 20 plus creators. It seems like half the phones broke as soon as they touched them.
Well, yeah, there was this thing where here you remember whenever it used to come, okay, the phones would come with the factory installed screen protector, or
Hmm.
they would come with that protective plastic layer that you would pull off. And so whenever the creators, I think even Unbox Therapy got one, and he would pulled it off and it
Yeah.
destroyed the screen. It just went black.
Yeah. I know Marquez Brownlee was the first one that I saw. Like he tweeted out his his broken screen.
Yeah, don't
And I
pull
was
off
just
the
like,
screen.
I was like, that's not good. And of course, that's user error, but it's a brand new design of a phone. And when you see that plastic, it's a natural reaction if you've had a phone with that plastic on it before. So Samsung could have done a better job of explaining how to use the phones. But beyond that, I mean, there were phones that people were opening them and the screen would just crack in two.
There was too much engineeringism and not enough consumerism in that phone. Because
Yeah,
the problem was is like we have this brilliant idea, we're gonna make it, and then we're gonna hand it to people. And it's like handing something technologically advanced to your small child, and like you take for granted how easy something is, and then they hand it back to you in pieces.
yeah. And the first design of that, the hinges at the edges of the screen were just like wide open, so anything could get in
Hey,
there.
there were brushes in there, okay?
Hey, oh yeah. But I remember that was one thing they fixed with it before they released it, was they put like little plastic pieces in there. And it took, instead of the Fold originally coming out like a week or so after the initial reviewers got it, it didn't come out for another like 6 months.
That's why it's in August. That's why they
Yeah.
had pushed it back because originally they had and that was the year of the multiple unpacked events. It was like unpacked for everything. It's like we have an unpacked
Yeah.
event like in February, then they had the unpacked event in April, and then they ended up pushing it back to the fall. And it came out around the time the Note did.
Right. Now they don't even do unpacked. Like they've always done unpacked, or at least a version of it in the US, but
They
not,
have.
yeah, not now. I don't know if it's because travel has become so difficult, but I know they brought a bunch of creators over to
Yeah, they
Korea.
did, and that's exciting. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we'll get to go next year. Maybe we can do a podcast from Seoul next year. I'd love to go, but I think a lot of it has to do with travel being shut down for so long. I think it's kind of
Yeah.
like a celebration, like a Mecca. We'll bring people out here, and we'll have this
Yeah.
big event.
Yeah. And it's I, again, like you said, I just wish that the products, at least from the phone side, I wish the products that they came out with were a little bit easier to get excited about, because cosmetically they're not really all that different. Yes, the little gap is gone, but you look at it and I don't think anybody really, when you talk about brightness, I don't think, I mean, maybe it's just that I stay inside all the time, and and I never get anywhere close to like 1700 nits brightness with
Well,
my phone.
yeah, that would sear my retinas. But I was thinking about that when I saw the announcement, and they're like, "Oh, it's gone to 1750 in this brightness from 1200." I was like, I've never once looked at that interior screen and thought it should be brighter. I thought it was
Yeah.
brilliant as it is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm glad, but also you have to remember that's peak. So
Yeah.
you're only going to see that and it's on auto brightness when you walk outside in the sun and it's sufficiently bright. So it's not a normal 1750.
Yeah, and maybe with HDR content, possibly. Um, I still only barely understand HDR content. I know it's like brighter and more like the colors are more not necessarily saturated as you see them, but it's just like a different level of color. But I still don't quite understand. I know it looks better, but
Yes, yeah, and it's funny because you want the HDR box, high dynamic range, and I don't want to make myself sound stupider than I appear in my videos, but yeah, it does affect like the I guess kind of like the latent brightness in what you're watching. It helps with the dark images, the blacks, and it helps elevate some colors and
right.
some other stuff. So it makes the viewing experience better. I think is the best way probably I could explain it, but yeah, HDR10. I couldn't tell you the difference between HDR10 and HDR10 plus. I mean,
No.
I don't
And
know.
my whole thing is so I've had a couple of Samsung TVs in the past, but Samsung doesn't support Dolby Vision, and
Dolby
I
Vision
u-
is beautiful.
and I have two Apple TVs, and they both Apple TV does an incredible job with Dolby Vision. I think of all the set top or like streaming boxes that I've tried, the Apple TV has the best picture quality of any that I've really spent a lot of time with, and Dolby Vision is incredible. So
Mhm.
I don't I still don't understand why. I mean, is it that Samsung doesn't want to pay Dolby for
It's
the rights?
probably something to do with licensing because I've
Yeah,
got an LG OLED TV,
yeah,
and anytime I see something that pops up and I've got Dolby Vision, I'm like, this looks so nice.
yeah, yeah. No, it's true. It's true. But it, Samsung has been curious. I feel like even with the S series phones, since the S21, and now with the folds, we've seen something very similar to the previous year's phone every year. And the flip got a larger back screen,
Yeah, so we're up
which
3.4 inches now, which I mean, it's cool.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's usable probably now.
I,
now,
I will say, so I was very anti Z Flip when it first came out. I'm like, you want $1,500 for this? It's fragile. I know
right,
this thing's gonna break, and like it's had subpar specs in it, subpar cameras, and then they gave the iterative update to the Z Flip 5G, which was the
right,
same phone. They just do a 5G chip in, and then the battery was just not good.
right,
But when they changed the form factor for the Z Flip 3, I'm like, all right, they're doing something here. And then the Z Flip 4, they gave us slightly enhanced camera setup, and then better battery life, better chip. The Z Flip 5 is where it's needed to be for like the last 2 years.
yeah,
And the problem is Samsung has just had this carte blanche in the US where there's been no competition. So they
right,
just like, we'll just give you the same thing. Here's the new Ford F-150 this year.
yeah. Well, I mean, F-150. I was I think it was a short by Marquez Brownlee again, um, talking about somebody asked like why they I don't know. It was something about EVs and like when Tesla will become the best selling car in the world.
Isn't it
And
already?
it might be the best selling EV,
Yeah, it's
but
certainly the best selling EV.
I don't think it's so the numbers that he threw out were since 1950 whatever when the F-150 was first introduced, Ford has sold 46 million F-150s.
That's a
it is
lot.
it is by far like the most popular truck.
I've owned
And
two of them. Great truck.
I grew up in a non-Ford family. My dad was very adamant about his dislike for Ford. So I've driven Fords a couple of times, but if I'm doing a domestic car, it's usually a Chevy. So I've got a Silverado right now,
Those are
and
good.
yeah, no, I like it a lot. I got it used. It was the highest trim package. So
All
yeah,
the bells
it's
and whistles.
yeah, like nice stereo. I when I buy a car, I always care more about like what's going on inside than what's going on outside.
You know what I didn't realize that I cared about until I finally got it is a heated steering wheel. You know how nice it's so nice in the winter.
Yeah, I've got that. I mean, there are some things living in Iowa or someplace, Midwest, upper Midwest, some things that are just difficult to not have. And heated seats, heated steering wheel, definitely among them. My truck
Maybe
has
hey, maybe this would be great for Samsung innovation, a heated phone.
Yeah.
I know that BlackBerry pulled it off before.
Yeah, Google's got the market on that right now, I
It
think.
keeps your hand warm.
Yeah, but my truck has air conditioned seats.
Those are nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's not like super cold or anything, but it blows through enough just to like cool down the leather in the summer months. So, again, like I think there are things that Samsung and other companies could do, but I think you hit on one thing that is very important. At least in North America right now, on the western side of the world, the smartphone game is a two-horse race.
Mhm.
Samsung and Apple. Google's making some inroads, but I don't know. Last I saw, I think Google's market share was like
It's like
one,
3%.
yeah, 1 or 2%.
Well, that's domestically, yeah.
Yeah. And I know that LG, at the time that LG got out of the smartphone market, they were the number 3 manufacturer of smartphones sold in the US
Yeah.
at like 10% or 11% of market share.
Yeah, I think it was right about
Yeah.
13%. Not worth quibbling over 1 or 2%, but yeah, let's say it's 10 to 15% they had, which
Yeah.
was not much.
It's not nothing.
But there was a lot of excitement because then Motorola actually snatched up like 8%. Like Motorola snatched up more than Google did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Motorola, I think one thing that kept Samsung or LG in third place was their budget-friendly phones,
Hmm.
and Motorola is well positioned with budget-friendly phones already.
Well, you
So,
basically translate. Like we went from the LG Stylo to the Motorola G Stylus. I mean,
right.
it's basically the same stinking phone.
Yeah.
But I mean, they were at a good place. They were already in a lot of the carriers and like Metro and
Yeah.
Cricket and places like that. Where hey, there's something to be said for having a good quality $200 phone. Like
Mhm.
not everybody's crazy like us that wants to go chasing these 17.99 phone rainbows.
Yeah, I know. I know. And again, it's, kind of diminishing returns at a certain point. I didn't get the S23. I didn't get any of the S20. I didn't usually I would get the Ultra and I just didn't, you know.
If
It,
I so I have the Ultra and I like it, and I've said repeatedly, I think it's the best. I think it's the best Samsung phone they've ever made. They tightened everything up where it needed to be. This is the phone the S22 Ultra should have been,
right.
and the Snapdragon 8 Generation 2 is really what fixed a lot of that, at least for me, in my opinion. Honestly, though, I have to say that the camera was, I think, honestly, like a step back in a few areas because
Mm,
that 108, the 108 megapixel they'd
yeah,
used for like 3 years was so well optimized. By the time we got to the 200, it wasn't quite as optimized yet,
right.
but it's going
Right.
to get there.
Yeah, and then they had the weird thing about, the moon pictures.
The moon, the moon conspiracy, the second moon conspiracy in the United. Yeah,
Well, the funny
did we
thing,
land there? Did you take a real picture of it?
I heard that Stanley Kubrick directed the moon landing on a soundstage in Hollywood. But I
I have heard that, and there is some plausibility to that. I mean, I still think we landed there, but I mean, it's a pretty believable story.
yeah, I remember watching For All Mankind,
Mhm.
the Apple TV show,
That's a pretty neat show.
and they went really in depth into how they like the technical aspects of positioning themselves and you know getting the lander out and all that kind of stuff. And with I mean the computers that they had,
You mean the dip switches?
yeah, and it just I can't I can't
I couldn't
imagine.
fathom. Like, you look at a picture of the inside of like the space shuttle, and there's like 1,000 toggle switches and buttons in there,
Yeah.
and then you got somebody like Jim Level in the back or somebody else. Hey, do this calculation so we can land.
I know. Yeah.
I forgot to carry the zero.
Yeah. Oops, we're now shooting off into space. So yeah, I mean, I think it absolutely did happen, but it's always funny to think about, like why did we stop going? That's my question.
Because it was a miracle. Like the fact that we pulled off all of those missions and didn't lose anybody and made it all the way out there so many times. The fact that we had like 50 years to reflect on this,
Yeah.
because now that NASA is so safe, like they won't do anything that could like possibly risk human life. And there was this, I think, American adventurous spirit, and of course, trying to beat the Russians and all that stuff. But I mean, there was that certain spirit that they had back then. They're like, we don't care. We're not going to ask whether we should. We're just going to do it.
Right.
And now we're like, we were crazy.
Yeah, I think if you had like half of the knowledge that we have now, and you went back in time and was kind of and said to them like, look, I don't think you know what you're getting into here. But it always boggled my mind. Like, yes, the Cold War ended, and the Russians never got there. And I remember, well, there's another conspiracy about China trying to get there, and
and now we care again.
Yeah, and so
they want the moon rocks.
Yeah. It's really funny if you read watch that show For All Mankind or read any kind of speculative fiction about if we had continued to develop space travel and developed more of a presence on the moon and that kind of thing. It just you're right. It seems like at a certain point we sort of stopped. We sort of not really stopped.
They pulled a Samsung.
Yeah, we were just like, okay. And then they built the space shuttle, and then it just became like long haul trucking.
Yeah, they build an 18-wheeler just into space. Like, hey, we're building a space station. We can perform experiments. And you're like, what's the experiment? Well, look how water floats in space.
Yeah. Or my favorite was the twins experiment, where they sent the one twin to the ISS. And
the one who's here on Earth. Yeah, the Kellys.
Yeah.
Mark Kelly. I can't remember his brother's name, but they're both astronauts.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wonder how the one who had to stay here felt about the whole thing.
I don't know.
It's like, why don't we both go? We'll see if it's different.
Yeah, maybe they do that next time. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's one of those weird things to find, like two twins, like not two twins, but find a pair of twins who are like aviators who are also like the top upper echelon of astronauts that actually get to go into space.
Yeah.
I can't even get in my car to go to the grocery store.
Yeah. I know you. Do you have the full self-drive Tesla?
I don't. Well, I mean, it's capable. I tried the subscription out before, and it was like really full self-drive beta is just like one step above the autopilot that's built into it. So I was like, It's not stopping at stoplights for me. It's not turning. It's not driving me home while I play on my phone. So what's the point?
Yeah. It's, and then you hear the stories in the news about like Tesla's going 90 miles an hour into a tree or something. I don't know. Again, I never know exactly what the story is.
With that Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah. But it's one of those interesting things. Like I don't want to pivot entirely to talk about Twitter yet, but I will say that my enthusiasm for buying a Tesla has decreased quite a bit since Elon Musk took over Twitter. And not necessarily because of it. Well, I mean, I don't like the way that he's gone about what he's done there.
He's very cavalier with a lot of his stuff. Like I don't really invest much in it, but I have always loved the Twitter platform. And I know we probably have some more Samsung stuff to talk about before we pivot there. But I don't have that feeling. I understand people that do, because I know sometimes people's decisions can turn you off for the brands. Like if you don't like somebody, why do you want to support them and give them their money? But at the same point in time, I'm like, whatever, I don't care. It's like the best option that's out there. And my wife likes them and she has hers and she loves it. Like, it's great. I love not paying for gas. It's a good car. I'd still rather have an American made, pretty much. I mean, it is American made, but I'd rather have I like internal combustion engine cars.
Yeah. For me, like I had a Chevy Volt, and that was a really fun car. You get
about 140 miles.
Well, you get about 35 miles on the battery.
Mm-hmm.
And then it turns into, it's like the electric motor supports the internal combustion motor. Yeah. And so you still get like the pickup of an electric vehicle, but you're
Get a
running
little bit
on
more range.
you're running on gas, and you're getting about 40 plus miles per gallon. Um, and the tank was smaller, but it still was like a 300-mile tank, which is kind of the
That's
sweet
good.
spot. Yeah, yeah.
I think, yeah.
So I really like the Volt, and I wanted to get I've wanted to get a Tesla for a long time. And now that the Model 3s and such are much less expensive than they were,
Hmm.
um, it's much more attractive to grab one.
I'm going to tell you one thing. Buy Model Y. So basically, it's like the same drivetrain. It's like mostly the same car with a larger shell,
Right.
slightly higher off the
Yeah.
ground. I hate getting in my wife's Model 3. Like, I feel comfortable saying that 'cause she'll never watch the show. But, honey, I hate getting in your car because being a 6 foot tall human being,
Right.
you feel like you're climbing in and out of it. And like, I just don't like the way it sits, and it's like kind of a chore to climb in. The Model Y, you just slide right in, and it's the
Right.
same stinking car.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I went with a truck. Is I had the Volt, I had an Audi. My wife has a BMW 330e, which is another like hybrid plug-in thing.
Hmm.
And just getting into those cars that are low to the ground, they're fun to drive once you get inside, but it's just really uncomfortable. That I'm 51 years old now, so it's it's not as easy to move around that way anymore. And so I do like a car that has a little bit more of an easier entry point. Um, so and the Model Y, actually, between the two, I like the looks of the Model Y a lot better, because it still looks relatively unique, whereas the Model 3, like, it's easy to mistake it at a distance for a Ford Focus.
I'm not going to tell my wife that.
It's like until you see the grill-less front, you don't like it looks like another like small to mid-sized sedan until you're like right there on it. So I almost got one. No, I was really seriously thinking about getting one back in like 2018, 2019.
Hmm.
But there was something about having to put down money through and you buy the car
Oh
through the
yeah,
internet. I was just kind of like, I've bought so many cars over the years, and again, maybe this is just a generational thing, but going to a dealership, looking at the car, driving the car, you know,
it is really nice not having to deal with car salesmen, though.
yeah. I've never been a big haggler.
Hmm.
Um, I, I just feel like there's a price that I'm willing to pay, and I'm going to get the vehicle that'll get me there. They always seem to get you, you know, into something just a couple of $100 more expensive than you wanted it to be.
It's
But
only $4 extra a month on your monthly payment.
it's like, yeah, until suddenly it's not. But I remember I got the Jeep Renegade, the Batman versus Superman version,
Oh, cool.
and they just had it at a lot that was, well, I live in Cedar Rapids now, but I used to live in Iowa City. Cedar Rapids is about 40 minutes away, and they had it on the lot, and I was just like, oh, I got so excited, I had to get it. Um, and ultimately, like, that ended up being like driving us like a mid-sized sedan. It's a much smaller vehicle than it looked like, you know.
Hmm.
So yeah, the Tesla thing, it seems like it's much easier now than it was even like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah,
Um,
they've been working on that a lot.
yeah, I one thing that I was always concerned about living in Iowa. I think there are three superchar at the time there were three superchargers in Iowa. One was on like the far eastern end of the state, one was in the middle of the state, one was on the far western side of the state, like near Omaha.
Yeah,
And
they're still working on building out the infrastructure. Like it's getting better. I mean, you're still in like the pioneer days. I mean, it's getting better and better. I mean, it's less pain points each year that goes by, but we're still not there. And it's
yeah,
not like the gas station where you go. There's five of them within like a quarter mile.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's definitely for sure. I mean, there are we have some of our grocery stores now have chargers in the lot, and some businesses will have chargers in their lots and stuff. But it's not like I know in California, I watched a video of a guy who decided to get a Nissan Leaf and just sort of drive it and see what it was like to be 100% electric on a vehicle like that in California. And that at that time, the Leaf had less than 100 miles range.
Yeah, terrible range.
Yeah. So it was kind of like, well, it's your get around town car, I guess, unless you live in Los
You have to
Angeles.
charge. Yeah, you got to charge at home though, all the time, because especially when it comes to like heat and like temperature changes and like your
Yeah.
actual mileage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the Leafs now. I kind of took a look at what they were doing now, and they looked like they've really come up in range, and they look like, the original Leaf kind of looked like the original Prius, which was, like a budget sedan.
The range has gotten better. Actually, I have a neighbor down the street that bought one, and he likes to talk to me about EV stuff. He's like, "Oh, you got one of them Teslas,"
Yeah.
and he stops by my house. It's funny. You ever heard of Mickey Gilly?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's his son.
Oh
So
really?
he lives in my neighborhood. So yeah, his daughter lives next to me, and his son lives like 3 houses over. And he comes by and he'll see me out in my car, especially when he first bought it, and he wanted to come over and talk about EVs all the time. And there's different range packages where it's like 140 miles or like 180 miles and like
Right.
250 miles or whatever. And he got like the lowest one, but he's like, I just go a mile down the street. It's all I need.
Yeah. Yeah. Until like for me, it's kind of like if it's your most expensive vehicle, like if you're a 2-car family or something like that, and then you can't take it on a road trip or something. And to me, that's always been like the big bugaboo about it. But yeah, I really liked when I first saw the Rivians. I
Those
was
are
like,
fancy looking cars.
yeah, I was just like, okay, I want a bigger car anyway. I'm driving a truck. I want a bigger car. And then the Rivians were like really sexy, but they start at
Oh, they're
80
crazy
grand.
expensive. Like, I really like the way the new DeLorean looks. Like, have you seen the new
No,
DeLorean
I
EV?
haven't seen it. No.
Oh, you got to look it up. I still have. I don't think they're in production yet. I think they're working on it. I think you
Right.
can like pre-order them. But man, that's a sexy looking car. They previewed it in this new Fast and the Furious movie. They had
Oh,
one.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks nice.
I just saw today some pictures of the new Mini Cooper that's going to be an EV,
I love Mini Coopers. I had one.
and it has a circular screen instead of like a rectangle. It has a circle,
That sounds
and
like something they do.
yeah, but it kind of mirrors the design cues that they had when the Mini Cooper came out. What was that, like probably 2000, like around the 2000s, and they
Hmm.
kind of had the analog clock that was a circle, and everything was kind of centered around the console, and it had a very rounded kind of design.
Yeah,
So it feels like it's keeping with that kind of design, but doing
I,
something entirely different. Round screen is definitely unique.
them and Samsung with their watches. Yeah,
You know,
actually, I gotta say, like, so I actually do like, so like we've got the new foldable phones, we got the new flip, we got the new fold, we got the new tablets. I like that they brought back with the Galaxy Watch 6 Classic that bezel,
yeah,
the rotating bezel around it. Like, I don't know what it is, but I guess it's the old classic watch person in me. I
right,
love having the rotating bezel on a smartwatch.
yeah, yeah. And I got the Galaxy. I guess it was just called the Watch 5, the sort of more the dressier one.
Yeah,
Um, and I have that. And when I was using my Fold, I was using that watch, and I really liked it. And there's a lot about Samsung's watch operating system that I liked. I liked that it seemed to track my like my movement throughout the day. Like if I'm trying to count calories and all that kind of stuff, it does it in a more traditional way compared to what Apple does with the iPhone and the Apple Watch and stuff.
well, I like Samsung Health a lot. Like, Samsung Health has come a long
Yeah,
way. Like, it's a lot far cry. You remember with like what was it, the Note 5, and you could it had the infrared thing on the back, and you could put,
hmm,
or was it the Note? Maybe it was the Note 9, and you could put your finger over it, and it
right,
would tell you what your temperature was and what your anxiety level was, and it's
yeah,
like, oh, don't move, hold your finger.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they've come a long way from some of the witchcraft on the back screen, but there's a lot of new stuff like with the sleep tracking, the battery life improvements. It'll tell you what your sleep animal is now based off of your, how
Sleeping.
you sleep. Apparently, this is a thing. I didn't know there's this apparently thing. So different people have different types, like ways that they sleep. Like
Okay.
me, I'm a night owl. I go to sleep late. I get woken up a lot. I mean, there
Right.
some people go to bed early. They sleep for long time. So like bears, pandas, owls. They have these things called sleep animals that they, I guess,
Okay.
associate different types of sleep behavior with. So it'll tell you what kind of sleep animal you are. But there's some meaningful stuff in there, of course, like fall detection. You've got your irregular heartbeat
Right.
detection,
Yeah.
atrial fibrillation, the menstruation stuff that it tells you now that it's all the rage with the new watches. So they're becoming more and more practical, and they're lasting long enough that they are usable.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think the thing that kept me with the Apple Watch was ultimately they integrated things like prescriptions. So I can integrate my Apple, and I don't know if Samsung can do this because I haven't tried it since I was able to do it with my iPhone, but I can integrate with my online account at my doctor. And so it has all the test results of everything that I've done. It has my prescriptions.
That's
Like
really cool.
there's
I've never even messed with that.
yeah, there's a widget now that you can program it. You can go in and say like when you're supposed to take different medications and stuff.
I should
And
do that because I just set timers all
yeah,
the time on my. I'm like set timer for 8 hours because I
right.
take ibuprofen or whatever. I've been taking stuff for forever.
Yeah.
But that I didn't even know you could do that with the Apple Watch.
Yeah, and I just saw like I upgraded my iPad Pro to iPad OS 17, and
I haven't done that yet.
when I turned it to landscape, it had automatically populated a prescription like timer in there, but it didn't have any information because I hadn't, I guess, like
Populated.
yeah. Um, but that's pretty cool. I mean, for me, like I take pills in the morning, I take pills at night, and it's pretty easy for me to do that. But but yeah, it's nice to know that that stuff is in there. Like one of the pills that I take, I don't know. Here's some personal information for those of you like listening or watching the podcast. So one of them is considered a controlled substance. So I can only get like 1 month's worth at a time,
Hmm.
and sometimes like it'll take me a while to get a prescription refill. And the first time that my Apple Watch and my iPhone notified me that the prescription had been put in, and then I didn't have to like call the pharmacy or anything like that. I was just like, "Oh, that's so
That's
nice."
that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's pretty cool. But the thing about the Apple Watch, I really like a lot of things about it, but it's very easy to have it integrated with your phone and to have it do things for you. Like when I was really sick, I think I had COVID, but I didn't test positive. Um, at one point, I was like shit, like just shivering, but and
Hey, you were
cold.
sick for a while.
Yeah, and yeah, it was like over 2 months where before I really got back to 100%. But when it first started, my Apple Watch was telling me like your heart rate is now like 120, whatever, and I was just like, I'm gonna keep it on, just in
So
case.
Apple is the master of things that Samsung can't crack the code on. So Samsung traditionally makes very exciting, appealing products, pushes innovation and things like that. And of course, Apple does their own innovation, but the way they do it is by continually adding more features that keep you locked into where you can never leave their ecosphere.
Right.
But I mean, is that we could have a philosophical discussion on this, but is it necessarily a bad thing? However, as somebody who I like competition, I like different platforms,
Right.
there's so much nice stuff about Apple, like the seamless integration between your watch, your phone, your tablet, your laptop, and then the exterior ecosphere with all the additional services connected to other devices, even your
Right.
family stuff, sharing. And then I use the Apple Card with my kids. I'm like, here, If you need something, use Apple Pay on your phone, whatever. I
Right.
mean, it's so nice.
And you can share that with family members
Hmm.
and all that. So yeah, I mean, for me, well, and this was a philosophical thing that I had to, to really grapple with. I was using so many different services, and the Google services, like the calendar, docs, that kind of stuff, they're all good, but they, I don't know, they always seem like there's a little bit of resistance there that's not necessarily there with Apple.
It's not it's not as seamless.
Yeah.
Apple, everything is so seamless and it's so simple, and you can be 4 years old or 8 years old or 80 years old,
Yep.
and it's it's very intuitive and it works, and then, like, that's why they don't really change,
Yeah.
because if they change something, it's gonna cause pain points for their entire audience.
And the thing is, and so I made a video yesterday where I talked about how I was frustrated with Samsung not really doing much new with the new phones, and and this is a weird phenomenon, but every time I make a video criticizing Samsung, the comments in the video will be about, well, Apple doesn't do XYZ.
Oh, and now you compare them to Apple.
And so, like, and my question is, like, why is it that there are like a decent number? I don't know if they're Samsung fans or just Android fans in
The
general.
Knights.
Yeah, but whenever I say something negative or criticize Samsung, it's like, well, you better say the same thing about Apple, or well, Apple doesn't innovate either, or something. And part of the reason for, I think one thing that like a very central difference between a company like Samsung and a company like Apple is that Apple makes good hardware
Mhm.
and everything like that, but they are, at the end of the day, a lifestyle company.
Well, very much so.
Yeah. And Samsung is still, Samsung is still very much like a, a manufacturer of technology products.
I
And
agree. I think there is a distinction to be made there, because nobody nobody ever is like, "Oh, I'm locked into the Samsung platform." Like, you're not.
no,
You can move freely between other Android products, and it's basically very painless. I mean, yeah, there's some differences between, like, Android 13 stock with Google and,
right,
like, vanilla Android and then One
right.
UI, but you're not like, "Oh, I can't use my watch anymore. I can't do my group text. I don't have my Apple Fitness Plus class." Oh,
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
it's so it's anxiety just trying to leave.
Yeah. And I've decided to start using like Apple Notes for organization stuff and all, and just try and use more of the Apple apps. And once you do that and you say like, okay, I'm going to use Apple
Jason's
Notes.
gone.
Yeah, it's like, but over the years, because I've used both Android and Apple phones, I've ended up taking so many notes in Apple Notes. And I've used Evernote too, and I've tried different things. When I had a Galaxy Note device, I tried to use Samsung Notes,
It's still not as
but
good.
and e- it doesn't. Apple has continued to improve Notes and a lot of the other first party apps that they have in ways that, when you like, the reason you would go to a third party app like Evernote or something like that is because the the basic first party app didn't do all the things that Evernote or whatever would do. And Apple Notes has a lot more stuff now. You can
Uh,
organize things by tags. It's just a much a much richer experience. And I think that's part of what people don't quite understand when they say Apple doesn't change anything. Like, they change a lot, but within the sort of sphere that they've already got going on. So as they continue to develop and improve these first party apps,
it just
then
gets better and better.
yeah,
Well, it's funny because with Apple, they stick with things forever,
yeah,
like forever. And then you look at Google, it's like, oh, well, they killed that again. It's
yeah.
like 3 iterations of the same app in 5 years. Like, oh, it's Google Chat or Google Hangouts. Oh, it's G Chat now. Nope, it's G Plus. So, like, could you please
And
just
and it's apps that are like the real central apps, like the messaging app. There was a few years ago they changed the messaging app like at least a couple of times, and you're just like, wait a minute, like,
But then you go to Samsung and you have Samsung messages, and then you would go to a Motorola and they've got there, and it's like it, there's a cost
yeah,
to be paid for using Android and moving around, or even being subject to the whims of Google, where they're continually trying to innovate,
right,
but every time they innovate, it's a new product.
yeah. And Apple had their period of that too, especially with their like before iCloud, there was Mobile Me, there was like a lot of different first versions of the first party app before they got to Pages and all that stuff. Um, but they worked all that out kind of before even like the iPhone had not fully matured. But
Mhm.
taking this back to the conversation about folding phones. So I read this article from 9 to 5 Mac today that said basically that when Apple originally was for Ming Chi Kuo, who's like a pretty well known and pretty has a long resume of being somewhat accurate with Apple stuff, had said that they were going to enter the foldable market in 2023. Obviously, that's not
That didn't
happening.
happen. Yeah.
Um, but now the forecast is 2025, and they say that when Apple enters the foldable market, uh, the segment will at that point hit $100 million within 2 years, which again, forecasting stuff like that is difficult. But one thing that Apple has always done and done well, and again, like this, I kind of feel the same way about Vision Pro as it's approaching, is that if they do come out with a foldable iPhone, or some people are saying it's going to be a foldable iPad or something like that,
Something that folds.
yeah, um, they're gonna do it in such a way that what was done before, because of because they are a lifestyle company and they're always thinking about user experience in kind of a top down from user experience way.
Hmm.
um it's it's going to be very interesting. And of course, whenever you say Apple's going to knock it out of the park with whatever version of a product that already exists.
Well, I'm still waiting for Apple to create USB-C this fall. They're going to invent USB-C.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it'll be like, I mean, the funny thing is, like, they were the ones that pushed USB-C into the forefront when they went all USB-C Thunderbolt with the MacBooks.
Well, they have to do proprietary everything so they can charge you for it. But it, they did, and then it's like, okay, now we're just like, it's so frustrating. And I know we can say, okay, well, we're frustrated with Samsung because they're not being as adventurous anymore.
Right.
But another thing, though, and I was thinking about this. There's two reasons why I think they're not. Well, three reasons why I think they're not adventurous anymore. One is competition. There hasn't been any, so why need to innovate?
Right.
Two is they can't afford to screw up because they've been building this safety net, trying to prove that this technology works
Right.
for 5 years. And if they have a stumble in it, then it's going to
Mhm.
screw their entire product line. And so that's two. And then three, well, as much as we like to consider tech like cool enthusiast things, exciting products, they're basically turning into commodities like cars,
Yeah.
which just every year, year over year, are not designed for you get a new car every 6 years, every 10
Yeah.
years, every 5 years. No, I mean, there are people that do go out and get a new car every year, but 99% of America just gets a new car every handful of years.
Yeah.
So, same thing with phones. We've been so used to year over year, okay, I got to get the new one because the new one's got new features. It's got all these great things. And we've really reached such a saturation point where it's like, okay, we're at 3.36 gigahertz with
Yeah.
an octa-core processor, folding OLED panels. I mean, well, there's only so much you can do here at this
Yeah.
point without completely really finding something cool.
Well, I that's why I've always said that, as I really think that we reached peak
Like
smartphone
2 years ago,
around,
3 years ago.
Yeah, like for me, it felt like 2018 or so was the time when, everything matured to the point where up to that point, new versions of phones with faster processors meant that they would work better.
It did for the
You know,
longest time. Like your Samsung Galaxy S4 to your S5 experience, completely different. Like
yeah,
no, it wouldn't be laggy, it wouldn't be choppy anymore, it wouldn't get super hot. Your battery would last more than 3 hours. Like there were meaningful reasons. Like the hardware really propelled it to this next level experience.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's once that stopped and it trickled down to where budget phones, $200, $500, the Pixel A line being a great
So good.
example. I mean, I have the Pixel 7a, and on the surface, it's virtually indistinguishable from a flagship device. You know
Mhm.
that the materials are different. You know that there are some things in the camera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's
But the
like,
experience is 99% the same.
yeah, yeah. And so when you get there, you're right. It becomes a commodity.
Oh,
And so,
I mean, could you imagine, like, right now, you could carry a $200 Pixel 6a, and you could be very content.
oh yeah,
5 years ago, a $200 phone, I would hate my life.
oh yeah, without a doubt, without a doubt. I got a I well, I sort of did an overview of one of those like really heavy duty Do uh, Doogie phones. Have you
Oh,
seen
yeah,
those?
yeah. Yeah, Doogie.
Yeah, and the thing, it has everything. That's one thing that's been very interesting to me. Like,
Oh, they throw everything in there. Like,
and
you want a infrared, you want a boombox 2.5-watt speaker, you want night vision, like, they give you all sorts of crazy things.
it's all the stuff that the Apples and Samsungs of the world took away.
Yeah.
you know,
SD
but
card, headphone jack,
yeah,
IR blaster.
yeah, it's
There are still people out there that are like, "I'm not buying it because it doesn't have an IR blaster." I'm like, "Is that the hill you
yeah.
wanna die on?"
I tried to use the IR blaster on phones in the past, and I
They
found
never
it to
worked
be a
right.
very frustrating experience. So,
Never worked right.
I mean, you know, Logitech stopped making universal remotes like 3 years ago.
Yeah,
So,
it's all a different it's like Bluetooth now, basically.
yeah,
They don't use that IR signal anymore.
it's either RF or Bluetooth.
Mhm.
And so you can control everything with just like your Apple TV remote or whatever set-top box or streaming box you have, you can just control all your stuff. So, yeah, it's I still have a Logitech, like one of the flagship models of the Logitech uh universal remotes.
Oh, like those $300 suckers that looks like the space shuttle console, it's like this
Yeah.
big,
Yeah, and it has the
and it
touch
has
screen on it and everything else. And I don't have any use for it because almost nothing is IR anymore. So I don't know why people are still hung up on the IR thing. I can understand SD cards.
I still think that phones should have SD cards, but Apple, and that's the funny thing, because we're talking about okay, this potential one day we will see the light of day where Apple makes a foldable device, and then they
Right.
will legitimize the industry.
Yes.
And it's funny because they're going to show up, and then we're going to have this new Apple foldable product. Everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, they're not even going to realize that Samsung ever has been making them for 7 years."
Yeah. And well, and I know that Samsung fans and Android fans in general get frustrated with that. And I understand that. But you also have to remember that for so many people, like they've never used an Android phone
Yeah,
and never entertained the idea of
could
using an
you
Android phone.
Could you imagine? We're on what year 15 of the iPhone now, year 17, something
Yeah.
like that. Could you imagine using only an iPhone for the last 15 years and never ever using anything else? Like I couldn't even, I mean, my brain couldn't even think of that.
You know, the thing about it is, like, I think I appreciate the Apple ecosystem more because I'm more familiar with everything else that's out there. It's not that I don't appreciate like, I think it's kind of like a Windows PC versus Mac. In the 90s, that was the thing that people argued over, right? So,
Hmm.
and the argument for Windows was always that you could do anything. You could get down to the command line. You could you could geek out and do whatever you wanted. And
Mhm.
the Mac experience was much more locked down. And I think the iPhone versus Android experience is kind of the same thing, where the iPhone has, like, they have put that whole system together so that it's imminently usable, and they've really thought about how people interact with the devices, interact with the operating system, and over time they have become like so much. They've really improved that. Whereas with Android, I think that Android has always been, like Windows was before it, somewhat hindered by the fact that
You can do what you want.
you can do what you want, but they didn't have vertical control of everything from software to hardware,
Well,
right?
the fathers knows best system.
Yeah.
Apple always knows what's best for you.
But the thing is, because they make the software, they make the hardware, and they can optimize
Mhm.
and really sort of like dial in those products. I mean, we're talking over like 15, 17 years, dial in that iPhone product.
It's seamless. I mean, and it's like just a testimony to what they've been able to do. They were supporting the iPhone 6S up until what, like a year or two ago, and
Yeah, last year.
you could pick up an iPhone 6S and still have basically the same day-to-day experience as an iPhone SE 2022.
Yeah.
Like,
And
how is this iPhone from 7 years ago still work this well? Like, I would not touch an Android phone from 7 years ago
I
as a
mean,
daily driver.
so we're talking, the iPhone 6S came out, I believe, in late 2016 or 2017. I can't remember right off the top of
It
my
came
head, but
it came out right before I graduated law school.
yeah. So
Like 2016.
yeah, and that was also the last iPhone with a headphone jack. But you know,
Yeah.
it's still a pain point for me. But I, honestly, I don't like at this point. I don't like the fact that the headphone jack is gone. But 99% of the time, I use wireless headphones. So, I mean,
Here's
if
what
you're not counting like sitting at my desk with headphones on.
so and here's one of the pain points that doesn't exist anymore. When Apple switched and went blue like wireless only, Bluetooth headphones sucked.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like, they were not good. I mean, the first generation AirPods were not good.
But
uh,
the one thing that they had, which was always the biggest problem with any wireless headphone,
connection.
was that automatic connection. And once that was nailed down, I think, well, all the headphones got better.
Yeah,
But the
and now, like, I couldn't imagine laying in bed with a pair of wired earbuds anymore.
Right.
So, like, where we're at now, if we were there when they cut the headphone jack out 7 years ago, 6
Right.
years ago, then there would be a lot less people but people have been very slow to adopt
Yeah.
getting wireless earbuds.
Well, and I think part of that too is that wireless earbuds were prohibitively expensive for a lot of people in the
They
early
were.
days.
Battery
Um,
life sucked, sound experience was not as good, they
yeah,
didn't have the
and
same power. I mean, there's a
yeah,
lot.
and yeah, the sound quality, if that was something you were concerned with,
Like,
you weren't getting anywhere near like high res quality if that was something that you were into.
no.
But now they're in the time between when they put out the AirPods Max, which is just what, 3 years ago,
Yeah.
to now we've got lossless Bluetooth codecs, which didn't exist before that. So it's getting more and more possible to get high quality audio, to get it at a more reasonable price.
Mhm.
The AirPods 3
I
were
love them. I
they're
have them.
really, really good.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I think it's become easier for people to get into the Bluetooth headphone market. Samsung, every other major OEM of smartphones has their own version of the AirPods.
And as far as the AirPods 3, like, I think when they came out, the price is good, the sound signature is good, and I'm glad they did it because I don't when I'm listening to audio, I don't always want noise canceling earbuds. Like, I
Right.
just like the open air, like, normal earbud experience, they're comfortable, lightweight, and still produce good sound.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I they were the first ones I ever bought to use for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one reason that a lot of people were slow to move over from the wired headphones too was that people got headphones in the box.
Hmm.
Headphones came in the box. And so that was something you didn't have to spend money on. And so if you're spending a lot of money on a smartphone and, you get in the Galaxy, Note
I know
7,
I miss
8,
all that. I
yeah,
no charger, no earbuds, no screen protector. Like we used to like it was a full kit loadout whenever
yeah,
you would and like that's why I don't really do unboxing videos anymore.
yeah,
Like you just open the lid and there's there's the phone and there's
yeah,
like nothing else.
yeah. And the stuff that they use to protect it isn't even like glued to it. So you can't get that peel like you used to be able to,
Yeah.
you know?
It's funny. I actually opened up a phone today, so I finally my favorite phone this year. I finally have it back. Is the Sony Xperia One Mark V.
Oh, yeah.
Not even a cable in the box. Nothing. It's 100% recycled material. It's just this little shell. You open it up, and it's like, ta-da! Here's your phone. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that phone is not cheap. So,
It is not cheap. It
yeah.
is a very expensive phone. Like Sony, and God love them. I think I'm still thinking. I don't mind paying because I like what they do with the phone.
Yeah.
And here's my thing, like going back to talking about Samsung and the 1799, I'm like, whatever. Here's the whole thing. The reason we're paying 1799, 1999 from the get-go is because they had to they had to create the technology.
Right.
So everybody was like, oh, same thing. I'm tired of paying $1,000 for the same phone. So like, okay, we'll charge you for it, but we'll make it.
Right.
But now we're on the fifth generation. It's like, why are they not 1599? Why are they not like
Yeah.
we're at that point where we know they're skimming more and more off the top and giving us less and less.
And if you look at, Samsung's financials that I think it was a week or two ago, it was Samsung Electronics uh, had a 90%, 96% drop off in revenue.
It's their worst financial quarter since like 2008. Like
Yeah.
basically they make like let's say this time last year made like let's say 10 billion for the
Right.
quarter, and this quarter they made like $400 million because there
Yeah.
was such a gigantic drop off in demand for their silicon based products.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think part of that is still hangover from when when silicone became, during the pandemic, they there was a fire in one of the major factories, and
Mhm.
then they decided to slow down production because they thought there wasn't going to be demand, but there was.
And then there was a ton of demand, and so everybody ramped up, and then the demand like, all right, we got what we want, and then they had to shut the kitchen back down.
And then it also takes, I think, 18 months from start to finish to make the dyes of that silicone to do what you need to do with it. So
And they've made a wide range. Like Samsung is one of the largest chip manufacturers in the world.
yeah,
They
yeah,
make memory chips, they make storage chips, they make processors. Like they make a lot.
yep, yeah, I know. And so I think when Samsung Mobile is looking at their profit margins, they didn't sell very many S23s, right? So
You know
I
what my prediction is for next year?
no, what?
My prediction for the Z Fold 6, we're go on the record right now. On the
All
record.
right, on the record.
On the record. The Z Fold 6 will still have the exact same front screen, but they will drop the price.
Okay,
I think they will drop it. I think 1599 is a bit adventurous, but I think 1699 is reasonable, and that's going to be the big thing. People are like, oh, well, now it's less expensive next year, and that's going to be the excitement point. I think they're going to drag it out one more year.
yeah, it's interesting because I really feel like $1,000 phones seemed like, you know, the top. And then, the iPhones you could buy and go all the way up to like 1599 to get the top level iPhone Pro Max, right?
Mm-hmm.
And iPhone prices have been
Consistent,
basically the same for a long, long time, but they have such a wider variety of phones that all have the same processor in them.
and that's what
So
Google's doing.
yeah,
Except for Google will give you the Tensor 2 and a 499 phone and a 1799 phone.
exactly. Exactly. And so I think that's one thing that that Samsung is going to have to think about. Like if you really want the fold, now the flip, they want, it was like $13.99 or $14.99 the first year or two, wasn't it?
So it started off 1449.
Okay.
No, sorry, I'm sorry. It started off 1380,
Yeah.
and then it went to 1449, and then it dropped to 999.
Right.
But also the flip sales like are are for every, I think last year what they were saying is for every 10 like foldable phones Samsung makes, or sold, 7 of them are flips.
Right.
I mean, which makes sense
Yeah.
because it's the more consumer, more pedestrian. It's got a wider audience of appeal. People are
Right.
familiar with the design. It's cheaper, and I think that's why. That's why you even look now. It's the best trade-in deals you can get in the game. You can trade in your Z Flip 4, and if you did the reserve your pre-order and got your 50 free bucks, you can get a Z Flip 5 for $50.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane to me.
I know.
Like that's crazy. And I wish they would do that with the Fold, but I mean, with the Flip, $50. Hey, I tell everybody, go upgrade your stinking phone and get the Z Flip 5 for.
Yeah. Well, I still have a Z Flip 4 that is broken. Uh,
And
my
that's another reason why I say it. Like with these foldables, like you never know. I like largely they're good, but it's like with anything, there's always a bad batch here and there. Or there's something that could go wrong.
Here's what happened. So I got the Z Flip 4 last year to review, and then I gave it to my daughter because she needed, she's an adult. I figured, she could handle it. But the screen failed within 6 months. So I went to Verizon, and I, of course, didn't buy the protection because I'm an idiot. But every time I think about buying the protection, I'm like, I'm just throwing away money.
Well, it frustrates me. I don't like it because it has a year manufacturer warranty. I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
drop phones in water. I don't take them in swimming pools. I mean, I have not. Out of the 100 of phones I've owned, I've broken like 2 in 15 years.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't worry about insurance. I just worry about mechanical failure.
Right. And that's what ended up happening was, because so I got that phone replaced with a reconditioned phone.
Mhm.
And it that screen broke within 3 months. And so at that point I called Verizon, and they're like, well, we've already replaced it one time, for whatever reason it couldn't get replaced. So I've had a broken Z Fold 4 just sitting in my drawer for almost a year at this point, and I've got my daughter an iPhone 14, and
That sucker's going to last 7 years.
yeah, I know. And so that is the risk of the foldable phones. I just think that, I was reading another publication today where they said that one of their Z Fold 5 showed up for, that they got sent from Samsung, and they opened it up first time, the screen just
That
cracked.
issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And it's funny because people will sensationalize that stuff. I'm like, you have to understand there's always quality control. There's always tolerances. Like, if you send out 1,000,000 phones, 15 of them are going to show up dead on arrival.
Right. Right.
I mean, there's a tolerance. Like, if you go buy a new monitor, there's an acceptable amount of dead pixels you can have in a monitor.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's a science, but it's never perfect.
No. And I think the thing that makes the foldable phones just that little bit more concerning is because it is like it is a mechanism, so there's a repetitive stress thing that you have to be concerned about at least. So I think it's gotten better. I didn't hear as many complaints about the Z Fold 4 as I did about the 3.
It has gotten better, and like I said, that's another reason why I tell people, like, we still don't know what the 2, 3, 4, 5 year viability is because they make
Right.
little changes every year, and it's gotten better and better. But like, if you can get the new one for $50,
Yeah.
that's guaranteeing you another year of warranty on your stinking phone in case you're worried about that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, Samsung and Google, at least with the Google Pixel Fold, are given really good trade-in deals, which I think there was a lot of talk about the Pixel Fold being as expensive as it was, and how that was kind of a miss for Google, because I still don't think that people look at Google's phones the conventional wisdom about Google's phones is that they're not like as premium a phone as, say, a Samsung or an iPhone.
Well,
I I don't know if that's true, but I feel like there's that thought out there.
there's always an association of value for what you're getting.
Right.
And when Google historically makes like plastic phones and like minimalistic type stuff, and they come out with these 500, like the Pixel 7 was 599, fantastic phone.
Yeah.
Pixel 7 Pro, 899. And then you have the exact same hardware a year later, but you're charging 1799 because it opens and closes. Like
Right.
fundamentally, to me, my brain goes, that doesn't that doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. They're like, it's not. It's the same thing for like OnePlus. Like OnePlus messed up because they thought they were to charge $1,000 for a phone like Samsung, and then people are like, "Sorry, you're not worth $1,000."
Right.
So, and that really hurt them a lot. Like they
Yeah.
tried, like Icarus, they flew too close to the sun.
Yeah. I mean, there was a market segment there for them, and there was a lot of positivity about the brand in the tech community.
There really was, and then they just went overnight, like
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. I do think they're coming back around. I just reviewed the OnePlus N30, and
Mhm.
that's a $300 phone.
The Nord series makes them the most money.
Yeah, and it's a good phone. There's
I I passed on it. I was actually asked if I wanted to review it. I reviewed the N20 last year, but I was like, it has the exact same chip.
yeah,
I was like, and it went from an OLED to an LCD, and I'm like, so
yeah,
I'm like, oh, whatever. I mean, it's a good phone. I don't want to say like the N30 is a very good phone. Just for me, it wasn't exciting, so I passed on the opportunity. But even they have a foldable phone coming out soon.
I know, I know. I've heard about that, and so yeah, the foldables are gonna. I don't think it's gonna go away at this point.
No,
Um,
it's here to stay.
I don't think it's the paradigm shift that everybody thought it was going to be.
No,
It doesn't necessarily change how you use the phone significantly. You get more screen real estate, and that's great, but it's not paradigm shifting. I personally think that the Vision Pro is going to be like the beginning of the next mobile device shift.
as soon as they can fit all that in a contact lens, I'm on board.
Yeah.
But
Well, yeah, and
you got to start somewhere.
yeah, and so a lot of people are equating the Vision Pro with what they know of VR headsets.
Nothing alike.
It's not the same thing.
No.
I've now looked at the X Real Air, and I've looked
Mhm.
at TCL's glasses.
And those things are cool, but still not the same.
No, I mean they look great when you put them on. And we were talking earlier about like laying in bed and trying to hold an iPad in front of your face. That solves the problem.
Oh, it's
Which
so nice.
yeah,
I use those. I have a pair by Rokid, and I love them. I use them when I fly, and like when I lay down in bed. My wife, she's like goes to bed at 10, like a normal human being,
right.
and there I am at 2 o'clock in the morning watching um, Love Is Blind on Netflix, binging it for like 3 hours. I'm just laying in bed with my glasses on and my earbuds in, and it's so cool. But what XReal, formerly known as InReal,
Yeah,
and Rokid and TCL, it's all geared towards entertainment and media
right,
consumption.
right.
And this is like a fully immersive, augmented reality like
The,
experience.
I put out a video last week, I think. So XReal now has a Mac app.
Hmm.
So you can do multiple screens. I mean, you can do a lot of what you could do in a traditional VR headset, but also a lot of the feature set that the Vision Pro is gonna be, sort of that's gonna be its bread and butter. So you can actually run this app and have like triple screens and all that kind of thing, and so they're kind of selling it as, you know, the Vision Pro for 1/10 the cost,
And it's
which
crazy to me. Like when you look at the Vision Pro and I watched the keynote, those sensors that you're looking at are like the size of, they said, like a postage stamp.
yeah,
It's this tiny little sensor, but basically it's like replicating everything your eye does on a massive scale. It's like
yeah,
it's insane.
yeah, I know. And as we were talking about before, when you think about how well Apple's hardware integrates with other Apple devices, and
Oh yeah. Like
I
you can I was watching the keynote, and like if your laptop, you look down at it, and it just pops up on your
Yeah,
screen in front of your face.
yeah, yeah. And for me, like the first time I got a pair of I had a pair of AirPods, and I was sitting in front of my TV, and I turned them on, and my Apple TV was like, "Hey, you got AirPods? You want to use them?" I was like, I
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, okay, let's do that." It's just those little things that I think the Vision Pro, like, there's so many pain points with VR and AR.
Oh yeah.
That until this point you've had to sort of say, well, okay, it's not perfect, but the thing that it does is cool. So I'll suffer through that stuff. But I think that so many of those pain points are going to go away with the Vision Pro.
As soon as I saw them sitting there, and then somebody walks into the field of view, and the visor goes clear, so you can actually see somebody and talk to them,
Yeah,
or oh, I'm going to walk to my refrigerator and get a drink without having to like risk my life and limb trying to walk
yeah.
somewhere. Like there are so many things that it will fix and elevate to the next level
It's going to be wireless. I mean, the battery will be connected by a wire, but that's
for 2 hours.
yeah. Well, the thing that I like about that, I saw somebody complaining about that, and I
You shouldn't
think,
be on it for 8 hours a day.
well, also because of the way that they designed those batteries, I would have to imagine that you could just unplug a battery and plug another one in.
Yeah.
So if you have two and you can keep them charging, then it won't be a problem.
Hmm.
But I
You
mean,
got to buy more.
that's a lot better than having a captive battery, which you know
Yeah.
is so.
Well, it also takes away a lot of the weight. Like I had a lot of serious structural issues on my neck. I can't even use like the Quest 2s, like
Right.
because they're so heavy and just wearing them
Yeah.
it it it, it messes me up pretty bad. So that's why I love like the X-Real glasses and things like that because it gives me an opportunity to experience some of those things without having all that weight and that
Yep.
stuff on my head. So when Apple makes a pair of glasses, like I'll pay $5,000 for them. I don't care. But I don't know if I'm going to quite buy the Vision Pro. I don't think I'll be able to use it very well, but it's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Vision Pro in 5 years is it's gonna. I think that something like that is the next step in. We'll move away from the physical smartphone and we'll go to some kind of augmented technology
It'll be like
that,
the movie The Surrogates with Bruce Willis.
or even something like Ready Player One,
Mhm.
had a lot of that. But I think there's already tech out there. I remember when we went to CES 2020, they were showing off tech that had AR in contact lenses.
Mhm.
So imagine when that's mature enough that a lot of this technology can then be. I mean, maybe something like the watch runs the
Everything.
everything, and then it's just peripherally connected to the.
I can't even imagine. So going back to what I was talking about earlier, where I said I made that tweet, which you wanted to talk about the X platform, but
Yeah,
I made that tweet about when I was a kid 30 years ago, what I was using for a computer with now we have the Apple Vision Pro coming out in 6 months. Where are we going to be in 10 more years?
yeah, yeah, and the Apple Vision Pro is going to have the M2 chip in it. And if you think about like the huge leap forward that the M chips were from the Intel chips that Apple was using,
Game changing.
yeah, it's just, yeah. So if they continue on that path, it, and of course that will force other companies to sort of do their own thing and catch up.
Which brings me to yeah. I was thinking about this the whole time we're talking about Apple Vision Pro. Apple Vision Pro. When are we going to see a Samsung one?
That's a good question. I mean,
Or
I
you think they
n-
just don't? That you think they're just not going to compete because they're so far behind?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what they have going on internally, right? So I don't know what we can expect from them. But you know who I think really lost in this whole race? My dogs won't shut up.
Hmm.
I think my wife and grandson just came home, so that might be a natural stopping point. But I do want to say this: Microsoft with HoloLens. I mean, they had the Xbox with the what was the tracking thing.
Yeah, they had the
Um,
camera.
yeah, and they had that, and then they had HoloLens, and I remember seeing demonstrations of the HoloLens thing being, like if you're a plumber, HoloLens can like show you the parts and like where to do things. Just, but they punted. They, as Microsoft often does, they just,
Has been like regressing more and more every year until like we're just going to do this stuff.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the Surface products are great.
They are, until we get a Apple Surface product and they get the silicon cost down so cheap that you can get an Apple one for $500 that lasts you for 8 years and
Yeah,
has all the Apple services.
yeah. That's the thing. I mean, and I think when the Surface originally came out, I think the real selling point was it's an actual PC in an iPad form, right?
Hmm.
And at the time, iPads were not very.
Hey, iTunes was great. All right.
iPads were just ancillary devices still running a phone operating system.
Like back when the YouTube logo still looked like a TV box with
Yeah,
the knobs on it. Yeah.
yeah. But now, I mean, the iPads the operating system is definitely a few steps forward. It's not as
It's got a lot
robust.
better.
It's not as robust as an actual computer,
I had a
but
buddy when I was in law school that only used an iPad with the keyboard dock
yeah,
for 4 years,
right,
and
right,
yeah, it was and that was then. So now it's crazy.
yeah. Well, I think it's time to quit because I have to go on grandchild help duty. But yeah, man, thank you so much for being here and doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh,
Um,
sure, no problem.
I always
It's a
love
good time.
these conversations. So yeah, thank you to everybody out there. If you want to find me, you can find me on YouTube at Painfully Honest Tech. You can find Adam here at TechOdyssey, and we're also on the X or the Twitter or whatever it's going to be next
Whatever
year,
it is.
next week or what. So, and Instagram and all those places. You can find us. Anyway, thanks so much for watching and listening. My name is Jason. One more time, Painfully Honest Tech Podcast, the podcast so honest it hurts. Until the next time, we are out. I have to end twice.